Hello out there. This is Kevin Breslin with another podcast of What's Doing. My father used to tell me all the time, if you don't blow your own horn, nobody else will, and you'll hear no music. We're here today with Ken Sunshine, who is a lifelong friend of his. Ken's a PR guru and a genius that most people don't much about, and Ken likes it that way. And also Dan Klores, who was in publicity. He's a playwright, and he's made documentaries. Kenny, how did you guys know Jimmy?
I met him I remember distinctly in 1972. I, of course, knew who he was and he was one of my heroes, but I got elected on a fluke as a delegate from Nassau County, where I grew up, although I wasn't living there, to the Democratic National Convention for George McGovern, the anti-Vietnam War candidate. And I went to Miami. It was the Watergate Convention. And there, as a delegate from Queens, Nassau, is Jimmy Breslin. And he was in the New York delegation making, not mischief is understating. He was a total pain in the ass to everyone, but he was fucking Jimmy Breslin. And he sort of took a little liking to me. And you sit in your delegation. I was right next to him. And behind us was a woman named Bella Abzug, the great congresswoman, who I ended up working for years and helped run some of her losing campaigns. She lost a lot of campaigns, but I loved her. But these larger than life characters, the labor leaders were larger than life, the hangers on, the bad guys in the New York political world. That's where I met them all. But I met Breslin then, and then we got friendly. And then I got to meet Jack Newfield, who was also a delegate at that convention. You know, the idea that journalists were delegates is a little weird, but welcome to show business. And I got very close to Jack. He became one of my best friends, same with Dan. But what's the one thing about Breslin, Newfield, and Pete Hamill then, who was also part of the triumvirate? They didn't learn to drive. I came from Nassau County. I knew I would drive them all over the place. I'm a terrible driver, not a very safe one, but they always were mooching car rides out of me. And then the group, I drove them to Atlantic City for fights. I drove them, I drive Breslin to crime scenes, like really dangerous ones too. And there was no GPS then. We would get lost in the middle of Brownsville. It was a little funky. He had no fear. He thought he knew his way around. You know, I'm trying to follow maps. It was, but we got very close, and he's very close to my family, and lots of great stories and memories.
Now, you brought up a good point. You said Breslin was a delegate. Immediately, the word ego comes into my mind now that I think about it with him, because he used to call himself JB number one. Did you ever see a newspaper writer, either one of you guys, call himself JB number one? I'm the best. I'm big. I mean, he was his own PR machine.
It was also part of the hype. It was a little bit of a joke on himself, to like say JB number one, I'm the greatest and all. It was a little of Muhammad Ali and a little of just old-fashioned PR.
Yeah, but Dan, do you think about it? Early on, he was social media doing this.
He was a great journalist, and one of the last ever New York City characters. I mean, that goes without saying. I grew up in Brooklyn and wanting to be a newspaper columnist, and so he was my idol. He and Pete, writing anti-war stuff and pro-civil rights stuff in the 60s and the middle of the 60s. I mean, so that's who I wanted to be. And it didn't work out that way. But, I remember hearing one story, maybe you guys, I'm sure you got this, but like talking about his ego and his need to be famous, which he really didn't have to, but, you've got to explore that, whatever that insecurity was within him, right? But I think it was Forst when he was at Newsday, or it might have been Wilsey at the News, who got a call in the middle of the night about 2 or 3 dead in Brooklyn, and they call Breslin to go out and cover it, and Breslin says, "Well, how many dead? How many?" And they said 2 or 3, and he said, "Breslin don't cover 2 or 3," and he hung up.
I think as a writer in this city, he liked to control the narrative, and he called himself JB #1. And have you seen any writers like that since him? Can anybody even do that today? Have this kind of power like Damon Runyon?
No, obviously no, but I think, and Dan is like I am. We don't want to be nostalgic for the old world when everything was
No.
there. Of course, the circumstances are different. I don't know that JB could be JB in this era either, with social media, the downfall of newspapers, columnists being trivialized. The world is just very different. He was very much a product of the newspaper era and of New York at that time. New York's different now, for better or for worse. And but he was such a gifted writer. Forget everything else. Nobody could write like he could.
The city columnist it's a lost art form. I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't look like it's ever going to be replaced. It's one of the saddest things. The tabloid columnist is gone. I mean, and then even the About New York column from the New York Times has been gone, and they had some incredibly gifted writers. I mean, Dwyer, a disciple of your dad, and Dan Barry, a disciple of your dad, and who revered him. It's dead. It's really repulsive that it doesn't exist, don't you think?
Do you think, and that's an excellent point, do you think that writing is even a quality that's needed now? I'm talking real writing with verbs, the color.
Well, of course it's needed. I mean, like, everything is so slanted. It started with Fox, well, we're going to go to the right, and then the Times decided to come to the left, and then this TV's to the left, and there's no more, the columnist was where you went to get away from objectivity. Now,
Exactly.
it's all subjectivity, I mean, you wanted to hear their opinions. You wanted to hear that the war was wrong, and by going there, you knew. You wanted to hear that what was going on down south was repulsive, But now it's all politicized. It's not PR. It's just politicized.
Yeah, I think there are some talented
And it's
writers.
offensive. It's offensive.
But I think, look, I don't want to criticize writers today. There are some talented writers. Columnists have infinitely less influence.
Well, it's funny you say that. Not to cut you off there, Kenny, but my father lived by the motto, rage is the only quality which has kept me or anybody I have ever studied writing columns for newspapers. There's no more rage with these writers. Everybody has to be so nice.
Yeah, it's also just dialogue is different. Look, I don't want to just be nostalgic for a different era. People communicate in a different way now. Look at young people, how they, their eyes in a phone. We don't have any phones then.
No, but what Kevin is saying, Kenny, is right. Rage with talent.
I agree.
That's what it was. It's not nostalgia. Now it's rage with anonymity.
He said, I invented the newspaper columnists in this city. And I really think that my father was his own one-man PR juggernaut. Forget about being a writer. He was a writer beyond, I think, comparison in many ways. His words, he slaved over stories. He slaved over everything. But did you ever see a guy like Breslin? Is there anybody else between him being Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, hosting Saturday Night Live, being there for Malcolm X shot, Bobby Kennedy shot, TV commercials he made, Peels, it's a good drinking beer. I mean, you can't label my father as one way.
No, he set the barometer, which no one else could meet.
But he also, became a larger than life personality not only because of his writing. That was clearly the basis of it, and he was an insanely talented writer, but he became the ultimate New York character and a real celebrity and worked it, got deals, made commercials, hosted shows, you know.
My father was fearless in journalism. He wasn't afraid to come right at you to get a story, to ask a question, and to stick up for someone, especially the permanent underdog. Do you think there's too much fear now because you have editors that are nervous, publishers that are nervous? Can a writer be as unbridled?
Of course. That's why people leave. You know, Dwyer was sick of it, and unfortunately he got ill. You know, I mean, it's why people leave, man. Like
yeah. Every young journalist in that era wanted to be Jimmy Breslin. Who do the young journalists want to be now? You know, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk? I mean, who's their role model?
Well, you know, like what are they teaching at Columbia? What are they teaching at Northwestern? You know, I always kind of felt like, you know, why go to journalism school, man?
Well, how can you? That's a very good point. When you have the president and you have threatening the AP, you have Jeff Bezos saying he's going to tailor their editorials. How can a writer have any backbone now and just say with the truth?
Well, and it even goes the other way. I mean, look what they did to that guy at the Times because he ran that senator's story from Arkansas. They fired him because he runs a column because it's to the right. I mean, give me a break, man. And look at the guys, like when you talk about elegance, I mean, look at Kempton. I mean, you really have to you have to read it twice to understand what the hell he's saying, right?
Yes, right,
right. But what a writer, though.
And so if you speak to young guys they'll tell you the big difference between Breslin and Hamill in the newsroom. And you may not want to hear this, I'm sorry, right?
Oh, I'm fine.
Was that for a young columnist on the whole, Hamill was always complimentary of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he would give to them.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad, that wasn't his game. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes. Because I don't think it was a business for him. And at that point, I don't think he was there as a teacher. I know that sounds tough, but if you were a person in need on the street or someone in a situation that needed help, now he's your go-to guy.
Let me go back to something that said before that is, I haven't thought about it as much. I'm a CUNY trustee. So I speak sometimes at commencements, and the CUNY School, Graduate School of Journalism I speak at their commencements. And, you know, you get the feeling, Dan was saying, what do these kids do? Where are they going to work? What are they, what's unique, I guess, is they all get jobs, not always in traditional newspapers or television stations, because those jobs are shrinking by the day. But they all work there. I tell you, I like speaking there, and I'll rail about God knows what, Donald Trump or something, and I get a lot of applause, so I sort of like that. But they're very enthusiastic. They're in their 20s, and it's CUNY, so it's multi-racial on every level, reflecting CUNY. It gives me some hope that some version of journalism, this generation, there's a generation going in.
Now, just to segue a little bit back into the new times that we're in, the Washington Post now, they're revamping their whole editorial staff. They've turned the whole paper into, almost have to have permission as a writer, which leads me to get into the subject of Donald Trump, because journalists are one of his favorite targets. I think Trump said, I'll tell you what, I think the media is among the most dishonest group of people I've ever met. They're terrible. Trump licked his lips. Believe me, if I become president, and of course he has, do they have problems? They're going to have such problems. And one of the things I'm going to do, and this is only going to make it tougher for me, and I've never said this before, but one of the things I'm going to do, if I win, and I hope I do, and we're certainly heading in that direction, I'm going to open up our libel laws. So when they write purposely negative and horrible and false articles, we can sue them and win lots of money. So we're going to open up those libel laws, folks, and we're going to have people sue you like you've never been sued before. Now, how the hell do you go into journalism when you have the President of the United States saying stuff like this right now?
You fight the bastard.
What do you think my father would do?
He'd probably get fired, but he would be writing columns, brilliant columns, being critical and being very specific, and he would do it in the eyes.
Your father would find, Kenny's right on the word brilliant. He would find the brilliant angles. That's what he would find.
But it's a nightmare for public relations companies because now you're fighting the president.
Yeah, fuck the PR companies. I'm sorry, Ken. What the fuck they know, man? Give me a break, man. What? Come on.
But all the journalists have become PR people now.
Look what the Times did today. The Times has announced that they're giving the buyouts to X amount of people on their op-ed page. You think that comes from nowhere? I'll tell you the entity that deserves some respect right now, and that's CBS, because everyone thought they were going to cave, especially because what they have in front of Congress on that buyout, Kenny, right? Who's supposed to buy them, And they're not caving. They're beginning to fight back, whereas ABC, they buried Stephanopoulos. They buried that poor kid, right? I mean.
No, it's funny. My father against Trump, he was never afraid of Trump. I mean, we all come from a mile apart. But my father said the scandal in journalism in our time is that ethics have disintegrated to the point where Donald Trump took over news reporters in this city with the art of a return phone call. He said Trump descended down the golden escalator and he pulled a similar trick with reporters. He just called them back and he suckered all the media to have them write nice things about him.
Look, it's a very different era. If you had told JB in his last years that Donald Trump would be president of the United States, he would just fall over, be completely, make fun of it, said you're out of your mind. It's the times have changed. The thing about JB, though, that he was a survivor. He got fired a couple of times for doing really stupid things, but he actually knew how to survive. So I don't know that if he had been a columnist now, Trump is threatening. I think he doubled down on being who he was, and I'm not sure he'd be fired.
He would double down.
Yeah, absolutely.
He once told me, I survive in any climate.
He did. He did.
And by the way, when you talk about that, let's give, in my opinion, one of the greatest examples of what you just said, Kevin. He would survive in any climate. And Kenny, you remember this. What about Crown Heights? And Breslin went to Crown Heights during that big riot during the Dinkins thing. Remember what happened to him?
Yes.
Kenny.
Oh, I remember it well.
They beat him up and disrobed him.
He almost got killed.
Fucking naked.
Yeah, he almost got killed. And in the middle of, I tell you one thing about JB, though, it should never. What
happened was he was getting beaten up badly and they were mauling him. And one guy recognized him because he was Breslin and everybody knew him. And he was so big in the black community and he had helped out somebody that the guy grabbed him and somehow got him into a doorway and saved his life.
Yes, that's right. You're right.
This episode of Breslin's What's Doing is brought to you by EV Safety. EV Safety. Reduce your liability. Protect your customers and property. Keep insurance premiums down. Let EV Safety develop your facility's lithium-ion risk management plan with training, certification, and equipment. More U.S. cities are passing safety ordinances requiring on-site countermeasures to fight lithium-ion battery fires. EV fires are inevitable, as is your liability if you operate EV charging stations or park EVs on your property. When you have an EV battery fire on your property, a few minutes can make the difference between cosmetic and catastrophic damage. No company can afford a hazmat vent on their property. Contact us today for your evaluation on all your training and certification at evsafetyproducts.com. Once again, evsafetyproducts.com. Medford Fast Lube. Put your car in good hands. With more than 25 years of experience, the experts at Medford Fast Lube will care for your vehicle like it's our own without breaking the bank. Take the stress out of the unexpected. If your car needs repair, it can be expensive as well as stressful. Take some of that weight off your shoulders with free estimates from the experts at Medford Fast Loop. Our friendly staff is here to help. Located at Route 112 in Medford, New York. www.medfordfastloop.com or dial 631-475-2107. Medford Fast Loop. Advisor Insurance Group. Advisor Insurance resource experts in life, disability, long-term care, business, home, and auto insurance across the U.S. With over 60 insurance companies offered and over 30 years of combined experience, Advisor Insurance Resource simply can't be beat. Call 866-942-4181 or on the web at advisorinsuranceresource.com.
Let me ask you another question that you can, I'm interested because I've always wondered if it's true, and I asked your dad, all right? But I had a couple of people that tell me this on the record when I was doing my research. And it pertains to your mother. So I so I apologize. The story that I heard was when your mom was really ill, was that your dad got a call from the gangster in Queens, the Irish guy that De Niro
Jimmy
played
Burke.
in Goodfellas, right?
Jimmy Burke. Yeah.
Jimmy Burke. Kenny, you ever hear this?
I think so, but go on. I love the way you tell this story.
And Jimmy Burke called him and said, I understand your wife is ill. He said, yeah. I got the best doctor, blah, 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 blah. Right? And your dad said to him, well, what are you talking about? Like, because your dad would target him all the time, right? No, this is family. Does this ring any bell to you?
Yes, it does. And you're close.
No, I didn't finish, but please continue. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to help you there. Burke called the house and kept calling him. And I think my father was a little leery of being around Burke.
Right.
Homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, Jimmy, I got to meet you. I got to meet you. So my father had a kid, Dave, drive him. I believe they were on Lefferts Boulevard near that restaurant, not Vesuvio, whatever it is over there in Ozone Park. And Burke sees my father. He comes over and he's got a bag. And he goes to him, Jimmy, this is for you. And my father goes, what do you mean? He goes, your wife's sick. It's going to cost you a lot of money. I think he had a bag, my father said, with a ton of cash in it. My father told him, Jimmy, I don't need this. I have insurance. Burke said, but the doctors will bankrupt you. So he was very kind in that situation, Burke, with my father. Now everybody said that Burke beat the crap out of your father years before. And I remember my father in bed all with welts on his face. And I said, Papa, you okay? What happened? What happened? And he shook it off. And everybody said, oh, your father was beaten up by gangsters, which he never actually admitted to me, or to the best of my knowledge, anybody, that Burke did that. I think they had an argument in the bar. But look, you got to remember, they were both Irish guys, both tough. Burke was a gangster. My father was a wordsmith. He was a writer.
And by the way, you know what? You've crystallized it for me, because I really thank you. I love that you did that, because I was told the version where you've separated those two stories. I was told that your dad went into the bar to meet Burke, and Burke set him up and beat him up there. But you're saying it happened before.
That don't hold me to that. But when he met Burke for the money, that was, I think, in front of Don Pepe's in Ozone Park, Queens. And he brought the kid Dave with him for a reason. He wanted a witness in case Burke tried to shoot him. He thought maybe Burke might shoot him. No, that's a true story.
What won't a man do deep down if his wife and the mother of his children are ill? Right? He'd even go down there to meet with a scumbag like Burke, right?
Well, Burke kept calling him persistently. I mean, my father at that point was, I think, a substantial earner and had the insurances from the jobs and all that. But yes, I think Burke was so persistent, he went and met him. And, Burke's Burke, most people probably don't know who he is by that, but they would by Goodfellas. But you got to remember, my father came from that world. And we've discussed it in other podcasts that we've been on. He came from 101st Avenue. He came from John Gotti's club was down the street. Jimmy Burke was a mile away. But ironically, Donald Trump lived a mile away the other way, and Mario Cuomo lived down the block the other way also. So, I mean, the whole world in Queens there was a very, I guess there were a lot of different people there, is what I'm saying. Gangsters and great people, great politicians, a president of the United States. I have nothing personal against Donald Trump. I'm just telling you, though, in terms of writing, in terms of him threatening journalists, I'm so surprised because he thrived off of the journalists in this city. You guys know that more than anyone.
Sources. No, it's all about sources. I got one story that I frankly just remembered. I haven't thought about for decades. So there's a certain nameless big shot in the music business had a gambling problem and was in hock big time to the mob and calls your dad and says, what do I do? I got important clients. He said, they want to do a sit down and I may be dead. These guys are real monsters. And he says, so Breslin says to him, I'll help you there. He says, tell them you're going to meet them at Toots Shores right at the bar. Right at the bar, be very visible and don't worry. But don't make any sudden moves. Don't get tough with them. Just be very passive. So this guy who's, kind of a rock and roll type, music type, is with these guys come in, two gorillas, two guys who are just killers, and one head guy type, a little smoother. And they go on. And, my friend, who became a friend, says, I literally was shitting in my pants. I thought I'm going to be shot dead at Toots Shores bar. And where the hell is Breslin to save my life? And it goes on for like an hour, which is like 80 hours. And at a certain point, there comes Breslin, who was sitting at the other end of the bar, but they couldn't see him. He goes sauntering over and knows, forget the head guy, he knew the button men. He knew the guys that really would kill, like hugs and kisses, and completely disarm the situation. And then they leave. And he's with my guy and says, you got 48 hours. You don't do that, I can't save your ass again. And he would probably do things like that all the time.
But that was a world where guys circulated. He knew gangsters. He knew everybody. Nobody, young reporters now, no one, forget young reporters. I don't think any writers, I don't think anyone circulates.
And it's not even that long ago, but it is because we get older. Like, I spent the entire 1980s at the Irish bars down 2nd Avenue. From 42nd Street, where the news was, right, to 56th Street, Runyon's, Costello, Finnegan's, Flanagan's, everything, right? And Kevin, every night, all it was guys from the news, guys from the Post, occasionally guys from Newsday down at that Chinese restaurant Chin Chin's on 53rd, right?
Terrible, by the way, terrible.
And all anyone ever argued about is who's got the best story, who got fucked, who's got the story, right? Making fun of the other guy. We beat you, you beat us, right? Like that's what it was, man. Like it was warfare, but it was friendly warfare. And then, then we got a little bit more confidence, so we'd head up to Elaine's or then downtown to the fucking, what was the place called? The Lion's Head. That was the way it was. That was New York, man.
My father circulated, and when he found a story, he lived for it in this city, as you guys know. And I don't think there's many people that circulated like him.
Oh, but what your father did, he not only found the story and went for it, right? But think about this. He created his own characters.
Yep. Well, they used to say my father was fake news. He made up a lot of stuff. And I used to ask him, Pop, did you make it up? And he'd tell me, if I wrote it, it's fact.
Yeah, well, okay. Did you believe him?
Well, he said, I don't care about the facts. I tell the truth.
Oh.
No, there was no.
You can't do that now as a writer. Everything is fact checked. every reporter is fact checked. You're fired instantly if something doesn't jive right. I don't think you can have that much fun in the game anymore. I don't think there's anybody could have a life that he had.
No,
Impossible.
no one. It's not even a dying art form. Unfortunately, it's dead. It's dead.
And that's too bad for young kids in journalism schools who are out there fighting to tell the truth. But they're doing it almost like accountants, like everything's quantifiable. He had humor to it, life, color. He loves you guys. Even if he cursed you out and hated you, secretly he loved everybody who was around the city with the energy.
Kenny, I'll never forget, and Kevin, and I actually remember when he wrote it, and then when I was researching it, he would find the angle, and I think he might have been at the Journal American, and there was a great high school football player at St. Francis Prep, a Catholic school, right? Richie Zorro, and he was a Hungarian refugee that was a field goal kicker, right, from Brooklyn. What the fuck? So your father found the angle to write a column on a Hungarian refugee field goal kicker at St. Francis Prep in Brooklyn. You know what it was? Harvard they needed to get Richie Zorro. You know who they sent to his home? Bobby Kennedy Jr.
Wow. Wow.
Oh, wow.
And they got him. And they got him.
People used to say to me, how'd your father get this story? How'd you get that? They said, did your father have any formula for all the stories that he got? And my father had a good quote. He said, yeah, it's called writing.
Well,
see, at the end of the day, it was always the writing.
But I'm going to agree with you 1,000% because of all the attributes and the faults that your dad had, like we all do, right? He was a 5-star player. And writing, what beauty, right? Like, look at his books.
Yeah.
And writing can get you the angle or the anecdote. My favorite anecdote all time of anything I've ever read with him, and I'm blanking on the name of the book, but I loved it. I'd like to talk to you about it some other time.
Certainly.
Is that book he wrote about the Mexican immigrants that came to Brooklyn.
Oh boy, The Short Sweet Dream of Eduardo Gutierrez, a masterpiece.
A masterpiece. It was like a novella. It wasn't even like, well, what was it, about 190 pages, right?
Yes.
Kenny. So 14 years old, he struggles to get here, through the swamps and everything. He's got a 12-year-old girlfriend in Mexico. He leaves her. He moves into a house in Brighton Beach where I grew up. There's like 16 Mexican fucking immigrants. They're painting houses. They're all living together. God knows, right? They're like sleeping on top of each other, right? I mean, but they're working and they're sending their money home. And this little boy is sending his money home. And then the building collapses. They're working on a building in like Williamsburg or something. Remember, Kev?
Yes.
And it collapses.
Oh, right. I remember.
And little Eduardo, what was his last name?
Gutierrez.
He died.
He died. Yes.
He died. Now, this is Giuliani's first term. Right?
Yes.
First term. And it's owned by Orthodox Jews, this building.
Yes.
Right? So your father starts investigating, and he finds that no one's paying a price for this. The government looks into these guys, and no one's arresting them, no one's investigating, no one's convicting them. So what happens is your father finds out, he breaks this in the book. These Orthodox Jews, Kenny, they set the building up and they said it was a college, like a yeshiva college, right?
Oy.
So you can't mess with it. They give Joe Hines, the Brooklyn DA, a massive contribution, right? And your father in the book investigates it and finds out there's only one student in the entire college. It's a 95-year-old rabbi. Now, that's 5-star, right?
And my
That's
father resented Giuliani. Here, we can close with this. My father was not afraid to be unpopular. And it seems to me today that everybody wants to be popular. He could care less.
Yep.
When everybody said Giuliani was great, he called him a small man in search of a balcony for this very reason. And for the reason with the botched radios that he discovered during the 9/11 incidents, where Giuliani allegedly, apparently didn't give the police their own radios because he wouldn't give them a raise to get radios. So the FDNY and the NYPD were on different wavelengths, so they couldn't communicate, and hence a disaster on our hands in this city. But Giuliani was so reveled by everyone, like that people don't pay attention to the little details. And that's what my father did. And he wasn't afraid to do it, and he wasn't afraid to be unpopular.
I tell you one thing also about him. He worked hard at those columns. He obviously had a gift. People think, well, he just whipped it off in 10 minutes. I'd go with him to these crime scenes in the middle of nowhere. The body is gone. The cops are gone by the time we get there. He'd just be looking at the trees, looking at the lights, and it was part of his genius in what came out as great writing. But it's hard work. He'd sit doing those columns for hours and hours, just the way he would express himself.
Thank you. It certainly was. He would start at dawn and go till he couldn't do it anymore. Most often, 6 to 7 days a week for, I would probably say, 65 years. The man was a writer, and he cared about everybody he met in this city. He loved this city. I never saw someone so dedicated to the city and also the permanent underclass, anyone poor. Growing up, it was unusual because, here we are, a white family, comfortable, getting more comfortable. Your father's famous, Jimmy. But what he really always cared about was anybody struggling in this city. And boy, Ken, he didn't stop caring about them and writing about them.
Yeah.
And you're right. And Dan, he slaved over the words, writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. It was no joke. Anybody who thinks getting into this game now, it's a quick fix, hit your computer, clack, clack, clack. That's not what he did.
No, your father was meticulous. 5-star, and maybe one of the one or two ever, really.
He'd tell you no. The number one ever, he would tell you.
Yeah, well, he would.
JP number one.
What's sad is, it's like a great player. Like, I'm 75. If I mention Jimmy Breslin, no one the fuck knows what I'm talking about, right? But it's the same thing. If I mention, I don't know, like Tony Kubek, right? I have no idea what I'm talking about. No one does, right? Like Don Drysdale. My kids never heard of Sandy Koufax. How's that?
Wow. Well, my father did say, fame is fleeting. It comes fast and goes faster.
Yeah.
He would always tell me this, let's reminisce about tomorrow, not yesterday. So,
what a great line, man.
Sunshine knows it. Kenny, that's why Kenny said
steal that line, man.
Yeah. I forgot the line. The line is brilliant.
Oh, I'm stealing that, Kevin, all right?
Yeah. I have a very sick mind. Everything he ever told me somehow sticks in my head and can come out. I just remember it all. But let's reminisce about tomorrow. So I can't thank you guys enough for sharing some time thinking through what he did, his impact on the city and newspapers. And I hope somebody who listened, some young person, says, I can take a shot. Mm-hmm. Gentlemen, 1,000 thanks and God bless.
Thank you all. Thank the three of you.
Thank you.